Hey guys, welcome back here to Intuitive Angling, and appreciate you guys swinging by the channel today for the video. And guys, today we're going to be talking about everything Whopper Plopper. At the time of filming this video, we are almost into August, and in my personal opinion, that is the start of Whopper Plopper season. I think August, September, and October are the three best months for Whopper Plopper fishing. So I want to give you guys some tips and advice on how I like to fish a Whopper Plopper during this time of year. And there's a transition. It's like every single month they want a different retrieve on the plopper. They want a different color, that you fish them in a different area. So we're going to discuss that in today's video. It's going to be one of the most comprehensive plopper videos you guys have ever seen here. Also guys, I'm dragging a little bit this morning. Our son Owen last night, he works at, he's a senior in high school, and he works at the bowling alley here in Springfield. He didn't get off work till 1:30, so I had to go get him, and it was like 2:30 before I got in bed, and then the other boys were up early this morning, so I'm operating on not very much sleep here this morning. Also guys, before we get started, a couple things here. I will put my Whopper Plopper link and my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video. If you guys would like to get some ploppers using my Tackle Warehouse links, a great way to support intuitive angling. And also guys, real quick, I wanted to show you the two top of the line Cast King bait cast reels. If you guys are looking for some really high quality bait cast reels that do not backlash, thanks to these Halo Vortex braking systems, all titanium spool, built for stout, 11 ball bearings. You got the Cast King ALTI and the Cast King MGTI. Awesome reels. I'll have them, both of these, in my Cast King link in the description of this video if you guys would like to order one. And if you use the promo code Randy10, you get an additional discount on it. So thanks for putting up with the plugs there. Okay, Whopper Plopper, I have got this love-hate relationship with Whopper Ploppers because I've been fishing them forever. What happens here is, you guys may or may not remember it, but James Watson won a Bassmaster tournament down here at Table Rock Lakes. You know, it's been quite a few years ago now, on it, maybe 10 years. And prior to that, there was a handful of us that knew about the plopper and were fishing it, but it never really got out until James won that tournament on it. And once James won the tournament on the plopper, it just exploded like the Alabama rig. And you couldn't go to Table Rock, or probably even your lake where you fish too, everybody had ploppers on. The guys in the front of the boat, the guy in the back of the boat, you'd see, and you'd hear them buzzing through the water. This went on for several years. And gradually the Whopper Plopper, which was incredible when it first came out, it started losing its effectiveness because this is a highly telegraphical bait. And what I mean by that is some lures, like, you know, a plastic worm or a jig, are quiet and they don't telegraph themselves whatsoever, but a plopper telegraphs itself because of the unique noise that it makes. Therefore, bass can get conditioned to it, and they do get conditioned to it extremely quick. And that is why baits like a Whopper Plopper are extremely situational once they lose their newness with that. Unlike, you know, like a Cinco or a shaky head, they're gonna work forever. But a plopper is sort of like all those other lures out there that really have a unique movement and push water uniquely and have a unique sound. They lose their effectiveness greatly, and that's what happened with the Whopper Plopper. Nevertheless, it's still effective, but the plopper has become effective in a lot more smaller window. And for me, that window is August, September, and into October. August, September, and into October. So let's talk a little bit about the plopper. Talk a little bit about how I like to fish it, and then we'll talk about the areas. Now, my favorite plopper is the bigger one. I think this is the 130. This is the one that people ever started using at first, and then they came out with some smaller sizes like this. I know a lot of people that like the smaller size plopper, and it catches fish, don't get me wrong, but you just can't compete with the big plopper as far as for quality bites. So 95% of the time when you see me fishing a Whopper Plopper, it's the bigger size like this. Now, they all catch them. They make several different sizes, and some people have their favorites. And I know some guys that swear by the little one. So it's really up to you, you know, the size that you want. A lot of that also has to do with the body of water that you fish. If you fish a large impoundment that maybe doesn't get completely hammered all the time, you know, the larger one may work better at times. But if you fish a more heavily fished body of water, public body of water, that maybe is not the greatest fish in the world, you'll probably do better with a little bit smaller one. So that's really how I determine it. There's three basic colors I want. If you go into my Tackle Warehouse link, guys, and you want to get you some ploppers, you can get by with three colors. You need some type of a shad pattern. They make several different shad patterns here. Now the shad pattern is the one I use if the water visibility is pretty clear, like water visibility of over 3.5 or 4 feet. Also for more of a light, bright intensity day, like a sunny or partly cloudy day in the clear water, then I'll use some type of a clear shad pattern like this. Day in and day out, if it's just like water visibility, say 2 to 3 foot, average water clarity like that. Sorry about the dang train out back, guys. It comes through as soon as I start the camera up, that train comes through. But if you got water visibility about 2 to 3 feet and you've got just an average, partly cloudy, sunny, whatever day, but especially if you're throwing around shade pockets, that's when I like the black. I like the black anytime that, it's average water clarity, average light intensity, but I'm working down a bank and there's like the shade of a boat dock or the shade of an overhanging tree, or maybe the shade from the angle of a bank, the sun being at the right angle. Black is a great lure around any type of shade in the water, so I like black. Black is probably my favorite overall out of all the ploppers. And then my early morning and low light color, like right off the bat in the morning, if I get out there at daylight or if it's rainy or cloudy, I like this. They call this the bone color. It's more like a chartreuse. I don't know why they call it bone, but I think they call it bone in the Tackle Warehouse description. It's this yellow, this pale yellow looking, but that thing works really good in low light conditions. So if you just want to not get every color they have, you can get by with these 3 colors right here for that. Now, I'm going to talk mainly about the big one here. When I'm fishing the big Whopper Plopper, I have tried every type of setup that you could imagine on it, and the setup that works best for me is I throw this thing on a flipping stick. I throw it on that Megabass Alcleese flipping stick. I put 20-pound test Seaguar and Vizex fluorocarbon line on it and just go fishing. You can chunk that thing a mile with it. You can get a good hook set with it. You can control the fish. It's a pretty heavy bait, so it handles that heavy bait pretty good. But one of the reasons I really like the flipping stick with it and the fluorocarbon is the fluorocarbon gives me a little bit of stretch, and I want that stretch. A lot of guys use a plopper on braided line. I don't like to use it on braided line. I want some stretch in my line. But the reason I use the flipping stick is that when I get around targets, I can flip it down the side of a dock, or I can flip it next to the edge of a lay down tree, or I can flip it next to a lay down log in the water and be very, very precise. And I don't lose any fish on it. So I would highly recommend throwing the 130 size or the bigger one on a flipping stick. And if you do throw the little one, you can throw it on just a medium action bait cast rod with 15-pound test or something like that. Okay, now here's a big one that I want to talk about. The speed of retrieve on a Whopper Plopper is critical to catching fish on it. You can catch fish on about any speed of retrieve, at any given time under certain conditions. But if you're fishing the Whopper Plopper and you want to consistently catch fish, you have got to fish that plopper fast. So when I go fishing with the plopper, when somebody sees me fishing it, one of the first things they say is like, "Why are you fishing that thing so fast? How in the heck can a bass keep up with it?" That's because the big ones want it fast. If you just go blah, 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 like that, you may catch one once in a while. But if you burn that thing across the surface fast like that, take that flipping stick, point that flipping stick at that bait and reel it fast with a stop and go retrieve, and that thing is just smoking through the water going like that, those fish will come up and just freaking annihilate the thing. And you'll get better hookups too. It's like if you throw it slow like that, it's almost like they can see it too good or they hear it too good, and they'll come up and they'll hit it with their mouth shut or they'll get it short. But if you smoke it across the surface like that, they're trying to get it before it gets away, and they'll just clobber the thing. It is so fun when you're buzzing a Whopper Plopper and those fish hit. I'll give you guys one little tip. I shouldn't even tell you guys this because it works so good. If you guys are ever up on any of those Great Lakes, like all the Great Lakes, Lake St. Clair, those big famous smallmouth fisheries, you take one of these big Whopper Ploppers and just burn it as fast as you can on those shallow flats, and those giant smallmouth will come up and just absolutely smoke it when you do that. So that's the way that I like to fish it there. Okay, now hooks on the water. One little thing before I start the areas. One of the things about it is I don't like the stock hooks that come with a Whopper Plopper. I think they're too small. Normally I downsize my hooks. If you guys have watched many of my videos, you hear me talking about going to a smaller hook with a smaller diameter. Plopper is the one exception to that. One of the things that I found out about this, and this has been through experimentation, is I upgrade the hooks to a larger size, because the bigger hooks doesn't affect the action whatsoever, because the bait's coming straight through the water, and the bait's going so fast through the water, the fish can't get a good look at it. So I usually use a number 1 Gamakatsu G Finesse treble hook, for my spooks, for my ploppers. Big, that's the hook that I use in it right there. It's a big hook. I don't hardly ever use them. And that, I'll put that hook link in my Tackle Warehouse link in the description too. Okay, now let's talk about the meat and potatoes, which, it always is when it comes to fishing, where you want to throw the thing at. Now, where you want to throw it at, it depends on how your lake's laid out, and it depends on the specific month. If you're fishing in August and September, I am fishing, it doesn't matter what the water clarity is. That's another thing about it. It's like, I fish a Whopper Plopper in the same areas and the same places. I don't care if the water visibility is, a foot visibility or 10-foot visibility. It doesn't really matter. If I'm fishing that Whopper Plopper when that water temperature is in the 70s and 80s, especially like mid 70s to mid 80s, I'm going back in the shallow, flat areas, almost like the same places where the bass spawn. This time of year, there's still perch and bluegills back up in there spawning. That's what those Whopper Plopper fish are doing. They're up there hunting those spawning perch and whatever else they can find up there. They're frogs or snakes or anything. Get back in those flat coves, and I usually just put my trolling motor down at the mouth of the cove, and I'll just burn water. I'll fish the front half of the cove, the mid part of the cove. I'll go to the back of the cove. I'll come out the other side, and then I'll pick the trolling motor up and go to the next cove. The Whopper Plopper secret for fishing in August and September is covering water and making as many casts as you can. This is not a spot deal, it's a pattern deal. And the more casts that you can make and the more water that you can cover, the more bass you're going to catch in August and September. And this is one of the few times of the year that I fish fast. Most of the time, I don't want to fish really fast. I want to fish at usually a slow to medium slow pace, but you don't want to do that with the plopper because you're fishing for isolated rogue bass. So put that trolling motor on a good speed. I usually put it on 5 or 6 or something like that on that Minn Kota I got, and just burn that bank. Cast that plopper right to the bank. I don't mean 2 or 3 feet from the bank. Cast it right within inches of the shoreline and fish that thing fast and cover water. Now, as that water temperature drops and you start to get in October, where that water temperature starts to drop into the 60s, and I don't like to fish a plopper if the water's below 60 degrees, but when the water's in the 60s, that's when I'm starting to move to a little bit steeper structures. So if I've been back in those flat areas in August and September, by the time that October rolls around, I'm like on the channel banks and the riprap banks and maybe even the bluff banks, something a little bit steeper bank. And this is the time of year where your light intensity is really important. When those fish are up shallow on those flat banks that I was talking about, it doesn't make any difference if it's sunny or cloudy. They're still going to be there and they're still going to bite. But when that water temperature starts to drop into the 60s, the cloud cover and the low light is very important on those steeper banks. So I want to get out there and fish the shade. I want to fish early in the morning. I want to fish it all day long if it's raining or cloudy. And I get on those steeper banks and I parallel those steeper banks. And I try to target sort of that 1 to 4 foot of water, making long parallel casts down a channel bank, down a bluff bank, down a riprap bank. And I've caught some really good ones that time of year doing that. So that's just some good fundamental tips with the plopper, guys. It's a very unique bait. Don't expect to get a ton of bites on it because it's one of those baits, unless you fish a lake that doesn't have very much fishing pressure, that the fish are pretty wise to it, but they still bite it under the right conditions, what I just laid out there. So hope it helps out. We'll talk later.